Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Tulsa. You know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches. However, a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want to get you fired up about a children's book series that teaches life lessons, morals, and of course, how to have good manners and a devotion with God. Now, my guest today is Mark Albini, and he has done a lot in his life. And I love when people do more, not just a little, with the gifts that God has given to them. Let me tell you a little bit more about Mark. Mark is a real estate broker and children's book author living in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. He is a graduate of Wittenberg University in Springfield, Ohio. He grew up in northern New Jersey near a brook that was teeming with wildlife. He spent much of his time catching and raising the animals that he was permitted to keep at home. When he wasn't, he was observing their behaviors. Well, Mark is happily married and plans to continue writing many more books in his series. So you know what I'm going to say. Get comfy, get cozy, because we are about to get started. So good morning, Mark. Thank you so much for joining me on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela today.
Glad to be here.
Now, I love the title of your series, The Rescue Ranch Children's Book. I have to ask, did you find that when you were writing, did the title come to you first and you kind of wrote your stories around the title, or were you writing and the titles came to you? How did that all work?
It was more that I picked a character that I was going to put on the Rescue Ranch, and then I tried to tell the story through either his eyes or kind of in third person, what was happening to that animal that day when he was on the ranch.
Now, with it being a series, many times that means that you're going to address a different topic in each book. So I have to ask, what are your books about?
Well, what I've done is I've taken the Rescue Ranch and basically continue to add characters, either barn mice or a rescued animal from the zoo, possibly a giraffe or a lion or a tiger. And each one of those has their own story, and each one of them will have a different moral or a different lesson, possibly just good manners or advice. But I try to make it as fun as I can to teach young children a simple lesson through the eyes of an animal. Makes it a little bit easier to understand. And it's one of Mom's lessons that she would normally teach as well.
Now, what age group are you targeting the most? Is it kind of our elementary school kids, our middle school kids, or a little bit of both?
A little bit of both. My first few books, I guess the first 10 or so are written for ages 4 to 12. But once you go past book 10, I think I've kind of elevated the reading age maybe a few more years, up to 14 or 15, something like that.
Now, when you first started writing, did you realize or had it come to you that you wanted to write a series, or did you think that you were writing one book but you enjoyed that so much, or you said, you know what, I have so much more to share, perhaps more books need to be included?
It wasn't that way at all. I actually was checking out at a grocery store, and a friend of my wife was the cashier that was checking me out. And I asked her how her day was going. Of course, she said she was living the dream at that store, but she also was an artist and just couldn't find any work. So I just made kind of an offbeat comment and said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll write a children's book. You do the artwork, and we'll see if we can sell it. And she said, great, I'm going on vacation. I'll be back in a week. A week later, she got back, and I said, I got great news. I wrote 4 books this week. And she went, what? I decided to get married. I'm moving to Colorado, and I can't do it. And I kept writing.
Oh, wow.
And now I have 26 books. written.
Oh, my gosh. That is amazing. I love it when God prompts us to do something and we take it to task and we make it happen. I love it. I love it. Now, for so many reasons, and for various reasons, people become authors. There's something that happened to them, and they want to share their story, or they've overcome something, they've figured out something, whatever it is, you want to share. Why did you write on the topics that you chose to write on, and why did you feel that the time was now? Like, when you decided to write that particular book, why was the time now for that particular one?
Well, I guess, because it's a series where book one leads to book two and book two leads to book three, I basically just introduce a character in book one, along with the title, Jimmy the Giraffe, but he meets a little barn mouse named Bobo, and so Bobo becomes the subject of book two. It just kind of, I knew I had to build up the farm, and I had to have enough animal characters in order to have interaction and in order to create a scenario where I could teach one of life's lessons. And so that's kind of how it all started. And then once I got to about book 9, I had my first two villains. I had Sammy the Snake and Billy the Bobcat. They were two outsiders that were on the farm that were not necessarily supposed to be there. And that's when I had the opportunity to have all kinds of interaction between the animals and create the different life lessons that I'm trying to convey through my stories.
Now, I like the title, The Rescue Ranch. Do you think that just how we judge a book by its cover type thing, when we read The Rescue Ranch, if someone has a love for rescuing stray animals, or they themselves simply want to go into the animal field, be it that they want to be a dog groomer, they want to be a veterinarian, would this be something, a book that would inspire a child to go in that direction if they already seem to have a passion or a love for that?
Boy, I guess possibly. I mean, for me, it was a passion and a love when I was a 4- and 5-year-old boy, just going out and watching the animals interact with one another. And I'm talking about one chipmunk with another and one squirrel with another, or even how the frogs and the turtles and the fish all got along in the same little pond. But but I watched all of that, and that, for whatever reason, made me more of a behavioralist, where I actually could learn what they were about to do and predict what they were going to do the next day when I went down to watch them another time. And I could actually set it up so that I would know their path of travel. I would be able to set a small trap, catch them, take them home, raise them, maybe breed them. And, of course, my parents loved and hated some of that, but I kept it very interesting around the house.
I could imagine. It's like, what did he bring home today? I love it. Now, do you think that because you had that experience and as such a young person, you were able to have an appreciation for nature, do you think that you were able to kind of share that passion a little bit in your stories, that your spirit kind of helped write the book a little bit because there was a passion there for that?
I think that's part of it, for sure. The other part would be, I guess, besides being an animal lover, I was a child that never liked to read. I was a child that didn't remember that well when I was in school in my younger years, but something that I always loved, no matter from the first day I heard it, was Clement Moore's 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. And so I thought writing a story, kind of prose and poetry, and maybe it's a new form of writing called prosody, but I love the flow of his story, and I guess I've tried to recreate that same flow with the stories that I write now.
Now, you mentioned previously that you had written over 20 books. Did you, when you first started writing, and I understand how you're saying, like, you wanted to make sure that there were enough animals to represent the farm correctly, but did you realize that you were going to do over 20 books when you initially started writing?
Had no idea. Actually, never even thought about writing any more than the first 4. And when she told me she wasn't able to help me with the artwork, I almost tossed them and said, oh, well, so much for that. But I ended up holding on to them, and I contacted a publisher. And here I am today with 26 of them. And the series still grows because tomorrow a new critter will walk onto the farm, and before you know it, he'll have a story.
I love it. Now, do you have a particular number that you're looking at as a target, or do you think that the series will just it will grow as God leads you?
Well, I'm thinking along the lines of 50 books. I guess if I make it, great. If I don't make it, I'm not that young, so I have to live a little while. But I've only been writing for 3 years, and I've written the first 26 in 3 years. So.
So I love that answer. So it will be what it will be. I love it. Well, it is almost time for us to go to break. So I want to make sure that we remind everyone, Mark, what is the title of your book? Where can we pick up a copy? And how do we stay in contact with you?
All right. Well, it's actually the title to the series, the Rescue Ranch Children's Book Series, and that can be found on Facebook. You can also email me at rhyminganimaladventures@yahoo.com, and that's the 2 ways to contact me now. But the titles to the first 5 books that are published are Jimmy the Giraffe, Ricky and Bobo, Terry and Freddie, Sammy the Snake, and A Rescue Ranch Christmas.
I love it. All righty, listeners, now you know where you can pick up a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. My guest today is author Mark Albini, and he has written a series of children's books, the Rescue Ranch Children's Book Series. And I love that he has written over 25 books thus far, and it is a great way to introduce your children to not only animals, but the various lessons that each animal presents in the series. I think it is so cute. Now, Mark, I have to ask you, why should children buy your series, or why should their parents be interested in buying your series as opposed to someone else's? What makes your book, in your words, a little unique?
All right. Well, I first recommend that children read as many books as they can. Something I didn't do. But I think that reading mine, I offer something a little bit different. First of all, they're written in rhyme. So it's kind of like learning a song, and it trains your memory because you know what's coming on the next page after you've read it a few times. So before you know it, you can almost have the book memorized. And I think that helps a lot with memory skills, something I struggled with when I was a kid and have no problem with now. There's something else, too. I take some author's privilege to help with the memory. Ricky the Rabbit is, Ricky is with an R, Rabbit's with an R, and if you're in English class, it would be Ricky in capital and Rabbit in small letters. But I take a little bit of an author's privilege there and write it Ricky with a big R and then Rabbit with a big R. So if you remember the animal, you'll probably remember the name. So it's done phonetically that way.
Yes, I like it. I like it. Now, do you think that your books would perhaps make a really great short story, Netflix special, movie? You see where I'm going here. Do you think that could be something that it could grow into?
I do think it could grow into it. I want to have enough material with already the 26 books. Would probably make at least an hour to 2 hour show now the way it would be. And I have been contacted by some of these companies out there that are trying to solicit my information to see if it's something they want to do as a movie. So I think down the road it might very well happen.
Well, we wish you much success with that. Should that definitely be in the master's plan. Now, can you tell us in your own words how when you were writing, if I understand correctly, you were saying that one book leads into the next book. When you were writing, and I'm kind of asking this question for someone who may be an aspiring author out there, how do you know like when to stop this particular book, but still be able to segue this book into the next book, into the next book, so on and so forth?
Well, it's a little bit easier because when I introduce a new animal that might have a few words in one story, he does become the title or part of the next story. And just to give you an idea, in Jimmy the Giraffe, he decides to, on his way to school one morning, he stops off to have a quick bale of hay with Howie the horse. He leans up against the barn and gets his neck dirty. And he decides that he doesn't want to go to school with the dirty neck, so he plays hooky from school. But when he does, he meets a little barn mouse named Bobo. And Bobo is part of the title to Book 2. The title of Book 2 is Ricky and Bobo. And in that story, they build a homemade raft out of a piece of bark, and Bobo goes into the water and disappears. And when that happens, he ends up being saved by Freddy the fish. And Terry and Freddy is the title to Book 3. And that's kind of the old hare and the tortoise story, kind of a race. But it's a race underwater between a turtle and a fish, when the race gets interrupted by an uninvited guest, Sammy the Snake, and that's the title to Book 4. So it's very easy just to kind of continue to roll on, but I have to find a way for the story to make sense and then tie it all together with either a moral, a lesson, good advice, or maybe just some plain old good manners, and I think in today's world we all need a little bit of that.
Now, as you were writing, did you find that or with each character, when there was something that you wanted to introduce as far as like a moral or talking about good behavior or whatever it is that you wanted to discuss, did you find that you had a particular animal in mind that you thought would be able to tell that story best?
No, it doesn't really work that way for me, I guess. I just introduced the opening line, and it could be something like Grant the Grizzly scratched his back on the tree as he did every day since the day he turned 3. And before you know it, that turns into the next line, into the next line. And then I create some sort of interaction between the animals where all of a sudden I realize by what I've written that there's a way to take it to an ending. Like don't judge a book by its cover, or a bird's hand's worth two in the bush, or don't ever be bad and sneak out of your house. So those are the kinds of little endings that I put to my stories. And, of course, when it ends, most people are saying, well, geez, what happened to Philip the Frog or Henry the Hog? What happened to them? And, of course, you got to read the next book to see that.
I like it. Now, you have, I know that you have piqued the interest of our listeners, and they would love to know more about your stories, and I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but perhaps you could share a little bit more from one of the books, whichever one you would like. Is there something that you could share with us? Of course, without giving it all away, because yes, listeners, you do have to pick up a copy of the book to get it all. But do you have any part that you would like to share?
Well, I probably could give you one of the books, because in order to see one or any book, you'd have to know what came before and what came after. Because the Rescue Ranch, the series itself, is one long, rhyming adventure broken into separate books. Now, the Rescue Ranch is basically a fictional farm with typical farm animals such as horses and cows and barn mice. But it also has rescued zoo animals like lions, tigers, and bears who are too old or too mischievous to stay at the zoo, so they're sent to the farm to live out their life. But in this setting, the farm animals and the rescued zoo animals become the absolute best of friends, and together they fend off the wild animals that sneak onto the farm to cause trouble, the bobcats, the bears, the pigs. And so it's really kind of a different concept, but nobody ever gets hurt in my stories. I mean, they might end up falling in the mud, or they might get chased off or something, or they might actually get bit, but nobody dies. Absolutely nothing like that. It's all fun for young kids, and there's always a good, warm ending to each story. And I think it's kind of unique, because what the entire series is really about is keep in mind, this is all told in rhyme, and the series promotes friendship, honor, teamwork, and the golden rule for all those that live on the Rescue Ranch.
That is such a great point, and I'm so glad that you brought that up, that we do need to make sure that our children are being told how to do those things, that we are reiterating the importance of those things in their lives. Even though many kids are growing up thanks to, social media and, cell phones and tablets and all those types of things, that it's good that they're still able to get something that's going to teach them something that goes along with our culture, with our values, with our faith, and that's really, really, really important. Now, I
was going to say, starting them with a book in their hand, I think is great, especially one that's very colorful with pictures and illustrations. There's only 1 or 2 lines on each page, and it makes it, it's not overbearing. That was the thing that was hard for me when I was a kid. I'd open up a book and see a whole page full of words and go, I got to read that, and I got to remember that. So when I opened up a picture and saw 1 line, I thought, boy, this is easy. I can read that line, no problem, and get right to the next one. And if this is a good time right now, I'll give you a sample of book number 2, Ricky and Bobo.
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and start it from the beginning because I think people would kind of like to hear how it all goes together. But here goes, please. A rabbit named Ricky snuck out of the house to go search for food with Bobo the mouse. They searched through the grass and into the trees when all of a sudden they ran into bees. The bees buzzed and they flew all around while Ricky and Bobo stayed low to the ground. Then Ricky went left and Bobo went right, and soon those old bees were clean out of sight. But Bobo got scared about being alone when he couldn't find Ricky so they could go home. He felt bad to leave his friend by himself because alone in the woods could be bad for his health. There are bobcats and bears, and some are real mean. So Ricky tried hiding to avoid being seen. He went down by the lake and under a bush. When he felt from behind, someone gave him a push. It was Bobo the mouse hiding under his tail, saying, now all we need is a boat with a sail. So the two began to look around for something to use to get homeward bound. They walked by that lake until just before dark, and finally they found it was a piece of tree bark. Ricky pushed with his nose and Bobo pulled with his tail till the bark's in the water just needing a sail. Oh, what could we use to help us get back? Perhaps a big branch with some leaves still intact. He asked Bobo the mouse to make a small hole so the leaves were the sail and the branch was the pole. Then a small gust of wind pushed their boat on the lake, and that's when they knew they had made a mistake. Neither could swim, the water was rough, getting home safely was going to be tough. But then a big wave washed over the bark, and poor little Bobo disappeared in the dark. Ricky was frantic, yelling, man overboard, but when he didn't see Bobo, he prayed to the Lord, bring my friend back and don't let him die. Poor Ricky the rabbit was beginning to cry. But that's when he saw the most beautiful sight. Bobo was surfing in the moonlight. He surfed on the back of Freddy the fish, book 3, and that's when I knew the Lord answered my wish. Tired and hungry, they headed back home, and both were so grateful they didn't try it alone. For Ricky and Bobo, a lesson was learned, and for all the young children, a moral discerned. Don't ever be bad and sneak out of the house, unless your good friend is Bobo the mouse. Now that's book 2.
That was awesome. That was awesome. I love it. Oh my goodness. I could just see a little person wanting to read, like wanting to turn the page to see what was coming up next. That is such a great story. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was awesome. I love it. Well, I personally think that children's authors are a special group of people because you have to be able to, kind of get in touch with your inner child to remember the happy, the fun, the simple way, the amazing way that we used to look at the world and kind of shake off some of our adult ways of viewing things and be able to convey such a beautiful message to children as they read and pique their interest and inspire them to continue to view the world in such a magnificent way. So thank you so much for sharing. I really, really like that. Well, Mark, we are just about out of time, but I want to ask you, of course I'm going to ask you, how can we get a copy and all of that, but before we do that, I want to ask if there's a bit of wisdom that you could share, just a little nugget or so, for someone who says, I think I want to be an author as well. Better yet, maybe they want to be a children's author. But do you have any tips or a bit of wisdom that you could share with that person to keep them inspired or to say, go on out there and do exactly what you're supposed to do?
Well, I would say this, that follow your passion in life. If it's writing, then be a writer. If it's golfing, then try to be a golfer. But whatever it is, if you decide to be a writer, you need to express your thoughts with the passion you felt when you thought of the story or when you're writing the words. And if you're able to put it down on paper that way and create that atmosphere, then you've made two people happy. You've made your reader happy and you've made yourself happy. And I think that's the best thing that you can do as a writer.
And for the last time today, if you would please, can you remind everyone what is the title of your series? How can we get a copy? And for those who want to contact you, how do we do that online?
Okay. Well, you can certainly contact me through Facebook, and my Facebook page is the Rescue Ranch Children's Book Series. And if you want to contact me by email, you can reach me through rhyminganimaladventures@yahoo.com. And the first 4 books are Jimmy the Giraffe, Ricky and Bobo, Terry and Freddie, and Sammy the Snake. And then I have a special, which is A Rescue Ranch Christmas, and that's also available. And that will be available nonstop year-round through UR-Link, which is a publisher that has taken on that particular one book.
I love it. Well, Mark Albini, thank you so much for being on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela today.
Well, thank you for having me.
And listeners, thank you as well for tuning in and joining us again. And as always, may you receive God's grace and mercy in all that you do. And remember to be blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.